Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to your brand new factual legal breaking reportings video analysis updates. Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so sorry that I'm getting to these reportings that are factual and unfabricated a little later than usual. Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, we're starting off with our morning briefing, aka the 7 by the Washington Post, for a total of 14 reportings, followed by some factual reportings for your morning after this morning briefing, aka the 7, for a total of 14 reportings. Let's get into it.
The U.S. is struggling to maintain a fragile truce with Iran. The CDC held back a report about COVID vaccines. And a new study revealed the cognitive benefits of logging off. That's some of what we'll get to on the 7 from the Washington Post. I'm Hannah Jewell. It's Thursday, April 9th. Let's get you caught up with today's 7 stories. Number 1. Since President Trump declared a 2-week ceasefire with Iran on Tuesday, the status of that deal has been mired in confusion. Both sides are claiming victory, but Iran and the U.S. do not agree on the ceasefire's terms. Trump's goals at the start of the war, like the elimination of Iran's nuclear program and ballistic missiles and regime change, have not been achieved. But the White House is still touting the deal. Here's Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at a press conference yesterday.
Iran could no longer tolerate being bombed or taking the gamble of what was to come following President Trump's 8 p.m. deadline last night. Iran has agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz, and as the president said, we have received a proposal from the Iranians that has been determined to be a workable basis on which to negotiate.
While Iran did let some ships through the Strait of Hormuz yesterday, no oil or gas tankers have passed since the ceasefire took effect. Another point of tension is in Lebanon. Israel declared that its assault on Lebanon was not covered by the truce. Hours after the U.S.-Iran ceasefire took hold, Israel killed at least 182 people across the country, according to Lebanese authorities. Iran warned of a military response if the strikes on Lebanon did not stop. Negotiations between Iran and the U.S. are expected to begin on Friday. Vice President J.D. Vance is likely to head up the American delegation. Number 2 is a Post exclusive. The CDC delayed publishing a report that showed COVID vaccine benefits. The report had been scheduled for publication on March 19th in the CDC's flagship scientific journal, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. It showed that the COVID-19 vaccine cut the likelihood of emergency department visits and hospitalizations for healthy adults last winter by about half. According to scientists who spoke to the Post, acting CDC Director Jay Bhattacharya delayed it over concerns about its methodology, even though the same methodology has been used many times, including in a study published in the same journal the week before. The delay has raised concerns among current and former officials that information about the vaccine's benefits are being downplayed because they conflict with the views of Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He is an outspoken critic of COVID-19 shots, once calling them the deadliest vaccine ever made, and has taken steps to limit their recommendation. Number 3. Officials said Pam Bondi will not testify in Congress about the Epstein files.
Which, ladies and gentlemen, is flat out illegal and unconstitutional for them, the Justice Department, to say that she's not going to testify because a subpoena is a lawfully mandated subpoena, and it is illegal for them to even suggest that she is not going to testify, because even though she is not the Attorney General anymore for the United States, which thankfully she isn't because she is corrupt as heck. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it is illegal and unconstitutional, and she will be facing charges regardless of what the Justice Department says. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get back into it.
The former Attorney General had been scheduled to appear next week to testify about the Justice Department's investigations of Jeffrey Epstein. The Justice Department said yesterday that isn't happening. Officials cited President Trump's decision to fire her last week. In a letter, officials argued that Bondi had been subpoenaed in her official capacity as Attorney General, a job she no longer holds. But Bondi might not be off the hook. A committee spokesperson suggested that it intends to continue to pursue Bondi's testimony despite the Justice Department's letter. Bondi has faced intense scrutiny for her oversight of the Justice Department's effort to release the Epstein files. Her handling of the matter is believed to have played a role in Trump's decision to remove her from the post last week. Number 4. The Gilgo Beach murder suspect admitted to killing 8 women over 3 decades.
As I reported on last night, ladies and gentlemen, let's get back into it.
In a court hearing in Suffolk County, New York yesterday, Long Island architect Rex Heuermann pleaded guilty and confessed to the serial slayings and dismemberments which began in 1993 and continued through 2010. The case rose to national prominence after police discovered the remains of the women near Gilgo Beach in late 2010 and 2011, but for more than a decade, the case has remained cold. He was finally arrested in 2023 when investigators matched DNA from a pizza crust to hair found on one of the victims. Elizabeth Botchkill is the mother of Jessica Taylor, who Heuermann killed in July 2003. She spoke at a news conference after the guilty plea.
And I am glad that this is over as far as him pleading guilty. It took a big chunk of stress off of me and my family.
According to the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, Heuermann is expected to face 3 consecutive life sentences as well as an additional 100 years behind bars. A Supreme Court remade by Trump has ushered in historic defeats for civil rights. That's our 5th story. Trump made 3 appointments to the High Court in his first term, Justices Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, creating a 6-3 conservative majority. Together, they have helped push the court to the right. A post-analysis published this morning lays bare some of the key impacts. The Post examined 270 decisions handed down by the court in its first 5 terms between 2020 and 2024. It found that this court is the first since at least the 1950s to reject civil rights claims in a majority of cases involving women and minorities. The shift brings to an end a streak of successive courts expanding such protections that began during the civil rights movement. The analysis also found that the court has entered a new era of extreme partisanship. No court over the past 7 decades has been as polarized. A simple detox could erase years of social media brain damage. That's number 6. Most people spend way too much time on their phone. According to surveys, the average American spends 4.5 to 5 hours on their phone every single day. Research suggests heavy use of social media and AI could impact your attention and memory. But a new study with over 400 participants suggests we can reverse some of the damage. For 14 days, people used an app to block the internet on their smartphones, though they could still make calls and text. By the end of the study period, there had been improvements in their sustained attention, mental health, and self-reported well-being. The improvement in attention was the most striking. Participants effectively erased a decade of age-related decline, and the detox had a larger effect on depression symptoms than antidepressants. Even those in the study who cheated and broke the rules for a few days still noticed positive results, yet more evidence that it's a good idea to log off. And at number 7, a tiny experiment taking place on the Artemis II mission could reshape medicine. As the 4 Artemis astronauts looped around the moon this week, they were accompanied by 4 transparent chips about the size of a thumb drive. Those chips were seeded with the astronauts' bone marrow cells. Scientists plan to compare them to chips that stayed back on Earth after the astronauts splash down tomorrow. Studying the chips will help NASA, which wants to know the effects of deep space on human biology, like exposure to radiation or differences in gravity. That is critical to know as the agency plans to send astronauts back to the moon and beyond. These chips can be used to model different organs, including lungs, livers, and hearts. The hope is that they could also be useful here on Earth, and someday be used to test the effectiveness and toxicity of new drugs. That could help shift away from reliance on animal models that often fail to predict what happens in human biology. So good luck on the return journey tomorrow, astronauts, and keep those chips safe. All right, you're all caught up.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for that morning briefing for your Thursday. Let's get into our next factual reporting, ladies and gentlemen, that reads, today Donald Trump stated on Truth Social that the United States military forces in the Middle East are loading up and resisting, looking forward actually to its next conquest. Trump announced that all United States ships, aircrafts, and including personnel in and around Iran will remain in place until a real agreement is fully complied with by Tehran. The remarks were made during a shaky 2-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran, with Trump warning that if the agreement is not honored, the shooting starts bigger and better and stronger than anyone has ever seen before, which, ladies and gentlemen, is still a war crime regardless, ladies and gentlemen. Despite the ceasefire, reports indicate the United States is bolstering its presence with thousands of troops from the 82nd Airborne Division potentially heading to the region, according to posts on Facebook and reporting on NPR. Ladies and gentlemen, the comments regarding the conquest appeared to suggest potential future military action beyond the current illegal conflict that Trump started, ladies and gentlemen. Second to last but not least, the statement was published on Truth Social late last night, prompting widespread attention to the future of the engagement with the military. Ladies and gentlemen, please note that this information is based on reports from today detailing events within the context of Trump and his second unconstitutional criminal administration. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into our next factual reporting by the Hill, ladies and gentlemen, that is read by an automated voice. With that being said, before we begin, please make sure that you like, comment, share, subscribe, as well as enjoy for more factual, non-fabricated legal breaking reportings, video analysis, updates, and more that you need to know about on the side of politics.
Automatic registration for U.S. military draft to begin in December. By comments Ellen Mitchell. Eligible men will automatically be registered into the military draft pool by December as part of an effort to streamline the previous process of self-registration and save money. The Selective Service System. SSS, the government agency that maintains a database of men to be called up to serve in the case of a national emergency, submitted a proposed rule to the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs on March 30th. According to the office's website, most men between the ages of 18 and 25 are already required to register with the Selective Service. But automatic registration was mandated in December 2025 as part of the fiscal 2026 National Defense Authorization Act. The change, which was meant to save money, transfers responsibility for registration from individual men to SSS through integration with federal data sources. According to the website, the proposed rule is currently under review by the Regulatory Affairs Office and awaiting finalization. The U.S. has not had a draft since the Vietnam War, with military service being voluntary since 1973. But former President Jimmy Carter in 1980 reinstated the Selective Service in the event of a national emergency, where the registry could be used to provide personnel to the Department of War and Alternative Service for conscientious objectors. If authorized by the President and Congress, many have questioned whether a U.S. military draft could take place amid the war in Iran, which is currently in a tenuous 2-week ceasefire. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt in March said that while a draft is not part of the current plan right now, President Trump wisely keeps his options on the table. Trump alone cannot bring back the draft through executive action, as Congress would need to pass legislation to amend the Military Selective Service Act to authorize the president to induct personnel into the military. Still, failure to register in the draft is considered a crime and can prevent people from receiving state-funded financial aid and employment in numerous states, cause ineligibility for many federal employment opportunities and job training under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and can carry a fine of up to $250,000 and jail time for up to 5 years. In addition, immigrants who do not register may lose their U.S. citizenship. Under the new rule, men will be registered automatically within 30 days of their 18th birthdays. Women are still ineligible for the draft, even as lawmakers in the past few years have attempted to attach provisions adding women to the draft as part of the annual defense policy bill. The measures have all been stripped out before a final vote on the legislation.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, that is going to do it for that factual legal breaking reporting video analysis update. Let's get into our next factual reporting that reads, as of today, Donald Trump stated, reportedly issued a de facto ultimatum to NATO allies demanding that they commit warships or other military assets to the Strait of Hormuz within days. This demand follows a period of heightened tension during a United States-led illegal conflict with Iran that was not authorized by Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, my editorial edition, where Trump has expressed frustration over what he views as a lack of support from European partners. I wouldn't support Trump either, Europe, so you guys are on the same page with me. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, Trump is calling for concrete military contributions, specifically warships, to help ensure and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a critical energy shipping route currently at a standstill. Ladies and gentlemen, note that the Strait of Hormuz was open long before Trump illegally started this war. With that being said, leaders in Europe were informed through NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte, Rutte, in case the last name pops up misspelled in the reporting transcripts, that Washington expects these concrete commitments within days. Diplomats fear the ultimatum implies that failure to cooperate could lead to the removal of United States forces from unhelpful member nations, or even a formal United States withdrawal from NATO alliance. Pardon me, ladies and gentlemen, from the NATO alliance. The demand comes as a fragile 2-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran, negotiated after weeks of war, is on the verge of collapse following Israeli strikes in Lebanon that are currently ongoing. Trump has publicly lambasted NATO as a paper tiger, claiming it targeted leaders from the United Kingdom, Spain, and Germany for their reluctance to provide basis or direct military support. Tensions are further fueled by disputes over unrelated territorial desires, such as Trump's renewed interest in illegally acquiring Greenland to become the 51st state, which he cited as a reason for his dissatisfaction with the alliance. Major allies, ladies and gentlemen, like Germany and France, have historically been reluctant to join these operations, arguing that they were not consulted before the war illegally began. Germany Chancellor Friedrich Merz has indicated a willingness for a joint mission only under specific conditions, such as a stable ceasefire or a negotiated truce. Trump's threats, despite United States lawmakers have pointed out that a statutory provision exists that prohibits any president from illegally unilaterally withdrawing from NATO without 2/3 approval from the Senate or an act of Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, let's get into our next factual reporting that reads, the prediction market, poly market, is currently at the center of a major controversy involving allegations of insider trading and war linked to Trump and his administration. Dozens of newly created accounts reportedly earned over $1.2 million by the currently betting by currently betting on the exact date of United States airstrikes in Iran that illegally began on the 28th of February of this year, just hours before they occurred on specific users. Megaman turned an $87,000 wager into more than $500,000 on that single event. Similar suspicious activity occurred in January when an anonymous trader netted over $436,000 betting on the ouster of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro just hours before his illegal capture. Ladies and gentlemen, my editorial edition. Donald Trump Jr. serves on the advisory board of Polymarket, and his venture firm 1789 Capital has invested double-digit millions into the platform. Critics highlight that since Donald Trump took office, his administration has shut down Department of Justice ongoing and comedy future trading commissions investigations into Polymarket's operations that had been initiated under Joe Biden's administration. In response to these well-timed bets, Senator Chris Murphy has pushed for the End Prediction Corruption Act, which Representative Richie Torres introduced the Public Integrity in Financial Prediction Markets Act of 2026 to bar federal officials from trading on markets tied to government policy. The White House has denied any wrongdoing, stating that officials are focused on the American people and that implications of illegal profiteering, ladies and gentlemen, without evidence are baseless and irresponsible. Ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, let's get into our next factual reporting. That is our second to last but not least reporting, ladies and gentlemen, by the Hill, ladies and gentlemen. That's read by an automated voice. Let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado.
Sass details cancer battle in new interview. Death is Something We Should Hate by Max Rago. Former Senator Ben Sass, Republican from Nebraska, detailed his battle with cancer and reflected on his life during a wide-ranging interview with the New York Times' Ross Douthat. The conversation, released Thursday as part of Douthat's Interesting Times podcast, took place less than 4 months after Sass revealed his stage 4 pancreatic cancer diagnosis. In mid-December, I got a 3 to 4 month life expectancy. And I am at day 99 or something since then. And I am doing a heck of a lot better than I was doing at Christmas. He told the host. They told me over the course of the next couple of days that I already have 5 forms of cancer. Lymphoma, vascular lung cancer, bad liver cancer, and pancreatic, where it originated, the former senator added. So it was pretty clear that we are dealing with a short number of months left to live. Sass represented Nebraska in the Senate for 8 years, before resigning to become the president of the University of Florida. Before running for office, Sass was the president of Midland University in Fremont, Nebraska. He resigned from Florida in July 2024, citing his wife Melissa's recent epilepsy diagnosis. While speaking to Douthat, Sass praised his hospice doctor and doctors, Shubham Pant and Bob Wolf, 2 of his main oncologists at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. They described their work as being up here with a little pickaxe on a giant Hoover Dam working on pancreatic cancer. He said of his doctors, they get little cracks at the top, and sometimes little bits of water splash over, and there is somebody else doing it 400 meters over. As for how he is faring, Sass said his pain is 80% reduced from when he was first diagnosed. He also noted that he deals with nausea, as well as bleeding on his face due to intake of the drug daraxonrasib. During the interview, the former lawmaker's face was covered in dried blood. Sass, a father of 3, said he felt a heaviness with respect to realizing he did not have much time left with his family. I did not like the idea of my 14-year-old son not having a dad around at 16, he remarked. I did not like the idea of my daughters, who are 22 and 24, not having their dad there to walk them down the aisle. I felt a real heaviness about that. However, the Nebraska Republican said he has continued to feel a peace about the fact that death is something that we should hate. We should call it a wicked thief, he continued. And yet, it is pretty good that you pass through the veil of tears one time, and then there will be no more tears. There will be no more cancer.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, let's get into our next factual and last legal breaking reporting video analysis update for the morning hours of your Thursday, April 9, 2026 morning. Before we get into our afternoon reportings, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, please make sure that you like, comment, share, subscribe, and enjoy for more factual, non-fabricated, legal breaking reportings and video analysis updates.
Pentagon turf war ramps up between Hegseth and Driscoll. By comments, Philip Timitija. A simmering battle for influence between Pete Hegseth and the Army Secretary, Dan Driscoll, has reached new heights with the Defense Secretary's purge of senior Army officials last week. Tensions flared when Driscoll was picked last year by President Trump to negotiate with Ukrainian officials in hopes of ending the Russia-Ukraine war. According to 2 former U.S. officials familiar with the dynamics, a current U.S. official said Hegseth's paranoia has been heightened in recent weeks as the president has fired 2 cabinet officials. He is just really uncomfortable with anyone who could potentially be outshining him. The current official, who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss the internal dynamics, told The Hill about Hegseth. The Pentagon pushed back, saying The Hill's sources are serving up fake news to anyone gullible enough to write about it. Pentagon chief spokesperson Sean Parnell said in an emailed statement that Hegseth maintains excellent working relationships with the secretaries of every service branch, including Driscoll. However, a Pentagon official, speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss the dynamics, said Hegseth's team believes they have uncovered proof that Driscoll has become a resistance figure within the Pentagon, not only against Hegseth, but against President Trump as well. Hegseth, a former infantry platoon leader who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, has axed more than a dozen senior military leaders who had backed diversity efforts he derided as woke or viewed as too cozy with the previous administration. Hegseth's firing of Driscoll's widely respected chief of staff, General Randy George, along with 2 other senior military officials last week, stunned defense officials as the U.S. is engaged in a war against Iran. The current official said, the firing came on the heels of the Pentagon chief ending the suspension of the Army crew who flew a pair of military helicopters near Kid Rock's house in Tennessee, undercutting an Army investigation into the incident. The ouster of George prompted some Republicans to rally behind the decorated general, who deployed in support of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. On Capitol Hill, it has shaken some GOP lawmakers who have largely backed Hegseth despite a series of scandals during his tenure. According to the first former U.S. official, who spoke on condition of anonymity for fear of retribution, there is concern about the state and health of DW going forward. If you get rid of good, really good generals for no reason, and therefore they have concerns about Hegseth himself, the first official said, referring to the Department of War, the administration's preferred name for the Department of Defense. Driscoll, meanwhile, has won plaudits from both sides of the aisle. Among the 3 service secretaries, including the heads of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, Driscoll is doing the best job. A Democratic congressional aide told The Hill on Wednesday, after Hegseth's rocky confirmation process, in which Democrats blasted his past issues with alcohol and infidelity. The defense secretary's first rough patch at the Pentagon came when he shared sensitive military information in a Signal group chat that included the Atlantic's editor-in-chief. That was also the first time Hegseth became concerned about his standing in the cabinet and on alert for leaks to the media, according to the second former official. Driscoll, a close ally of Vice President Vance, has long been rumored as a potential successor to Hegseth should he get fired. He sees that Driscoll is a natural successor to him, the second ex-official said, adding that the White House told Hegseth that he cannot get rid of the Army secretary. Instead, Hegseth has sought to sideline and undercut Driscoll with moves like the firing of George and another one of Driscoll's top advisors, Colonel Dave Butler, 2 months ago. It is a way for him to, look, I'm going to signal that I am in charge of your people. I am going to try to undermine your leadership, the current official said, adding Hegseth is just trying to knock the Army down a few pegs so that he feels safer. The White House lauded both political appointees when asked about Driscoll's standing. President Trump has effectively restored a focus on readiness and lethality across our military with the help of leaders like Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Driscoll. White House spokesperson Anna Kelly said in a statement to The Hill on Wednesday, George was reportedly directly involved in another flashpoint between Hegseth and Driscoll last week, when the Pentagon secretary quashed the suspension of the crew who flew the AH-64 Apache helicopter near Kids Rock Estate in Nashville. Some Democrats on the House Armed Services Committee told The Hill that the service branch should have been left alone to conduct a probe and mete out punishment as appropriate. George, who has more than 4 decades of experience in the Army, was also in favor of the probe, the Washington Post reported Tuesday. Retired Marine Colonel William Dunn took a similar stance in comments to The Hill last week. He said an investigation was not necessary, given the obvious violation of Army code, but that it was not Hegseth's call either way. No one should intervene with the squadron commander's prerogative to discipline his pilots. Having the SecWar step in to stop discipline is a bad precedent. It does not matter if it is Kid Rock's house, he said in an email. We have rules and procedures set in place to keep people on the ground safe, as well as to protect the pilots. The friction between Hegseth and Driscoll has also come up over the defense secretaries blocking promotions of military officers. According to current and former officials said that with Trump ousting Kristi Noem, the former Department of Homeland Security Secretary and Attorney General Pam Bondi, Hegseth is increasingly worried about being removed. The first former U.S. official said they do not think Trump will swap out Hegseth during the war with Iran, but that Driscoll has been mentioned in circles if the secretary was ever left for whatever reason. That Driscoll was high on the list of potential replacements. Asked about the tension with Hegseth, Driscoll said in a statement to The Hill, I have no plans to depart or resign as the Secretary of the Army. Serving under President Trump has been the honor of a lifetime, and I remain laser-focused on providing America with the strongest land fighting force the world has ever seen. Well, he added, Kevin Carroll, a retired Army Reserve colonel who has served in the offices of Secretary of Defense and on the Joint Staff, said Driscoll does not appear to be actively trying to undermine Hegseth's authority or public image. From what I have seen in the press and from whatever it is worth, what I hear from people in the Army, it is not like Driscoll is scheming and plotting to make Hegseth look bad. I mean, Hegseth takes care of that himself on a regular basis. It is all just very strange, and it is just irresponsible, Carroll said in an interview with The Hill. The Pentagon official disputed that assessment, claiming the White House had sidelined Driscoll for fumbling Ukraine negotiations. In the past few weeks, insiders in Driscoll's office have been telling Hegseth and his team about strategy sessions led by Driscoll for the purpose of how to best undermine the secretary and the administration. Well, they said, Hegseth has tried to work with Driscoll in good faith and play nice, but Driscoll's subversion has made the relationship untenable. A source with knowledge told The Hill on Wednesday that they are not sure where the information is coming from, adding Driscoll is closely involved in the negotiations with Ukrainian officials. Parnell, the Pentagon's top spokesperson, has told some within the department privately that he is interested in Driscoll's post if it opens up. According to a current and former U.S. official, Parnell's interest was first reported by the New York Post. Parnell did not respond to The Hill's request for comment on his ambitions. An administration official, speaking on condition of anonymity, told The Hill on Wednesday that anyone claiming Sean is pushing himself for Driscoll's post is an obvious outsider spewing nonsense. Every senior leader in the department knows Sean is laser-focused on his current roles, including the head of Pentagon's Afghanistan Withdrawal Special Review Panel and the department's recruiting task force, and is not looking for another role and has zero time for political gamesmanship. Well, they added, Parnell ran in Pennsylvania for a House seat in 2020, but lost to former Representative Conor Lamb, a Democrat. The next year, he ran for Senate with the endorsement of Trump, but ended his campaign amid a legal battle with his estranged wife, who accused him of abuse. Parnell has denied wrongdoing. So far, the commander-in-chief has expressed steadfast public support for both Hegseth and Driscoll. All I can say is that he was treated very unfairly. And now those same people that treated him unfairly, that fought against him, they call me up saying what a great choice he was. Trump said of Hegseth during a Monday press conference at the White House, I am telling you, people that were not for him, senators, friends of mine, sir. I do not think you are doing the right thing. Now to call me up, what a choice. Well, he added,
Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for your morning briefings and reportings for the morning hours of Thursday, April 9, 2026. If you did enjoy these factual reportings, for a total of 13 reportings. I know I said originally a total of 14 reportings, but they are 13 reportings. Pardon me, there are 13 reportings instead of 14 reportings total. Ladies and gentlemen, see you this afternoon for more factual, non-fabricated, legal breaking reportings, video analysis, updates, and more that you need to know about.